Welcome to Trial Lawyer Prep. What if you could hang out with trial lawyers and jury consultants? Ask them about connecting with clients and juries more effectively. Then take strategies, tactics, and insights to increase your success. Each week, Elizabeth Larrick takes an in-depth look at how to regain touch with the everyday world, understand the emotional burden of your clients and juries, and use focus groups in this process. Elizabeth is an experienced trial lawyer, consultant, and founder of Larrick Law Firm in Austin, Texas. Her goal is to help you connect with juries and clients in order to improve your abilities in the courtroom. Now, here's Elizabeth.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and this is Trial Lawyer Prep. We are going to continue our series on grief. And if you missed the first episode in the series, go back and listen to episode 85, What is Grief? Because I think that'll give you a good foundation of what we're doing here, why we're talking about this thing called grief, and how on earth it's going to help us be better trial lawyers and maybe some better people as well. But we are going to move into our next step in the series, which is ways that we've been taught to handle grief. And I think that reflection back is so helpful to know and think about examples that, again, they're just going to help you be able to navigate things better when it comes to your client. As far as a quick background, everything that I talk about here today is based on my recent certification through the Grief Recovery Institute. I am a grief recovery method specialist, and we're just walking through some educational pieces so that you can be better equipped to help your clients when it comes to grief, maybe better equipped for yourself if you experience a loss or a change. So again, we talked about originally grief being emotional response, a normal, natural part of a response to change or loss in a familiar pattern or behavior. And we're talking about this because really this information can help anybody. But obviously we've learned that grief comes from many life events and changes. And in particular, my focus will be towards lawyers and any staff that may have contact with lawyers. So we'll talk about that along the way. And today we're going to talk about how we've been told very early in life about grief. So we're going to go way back in time, right? To when we're kids. And there's a lot of really great examples that come from childhood and what we've heard about grief when we have changes. But basically looking at from a research level, children begin to establish their belief system on how to deal with issues of life at a very early age. Basic psychology tells us that 75% of the reasoning skills that kids use for the rest of their life are established by the age of 2 or 3. 2 or 3. Okay, wow. Lots happening in that short period of time. And I think we also know from brain science that kids' brains develop connections faster in the first 5 years than at any other time in our lives. Okay, so a lot of things are happening for 1, 2, 3, and all the way up through 5. And so this is really when foundations are laid for learning, health, and behavior that can follow us through the rest of our lives. And this, of course, relates directly to processing grief and what we have heard. So one of the things that we hear, information that we're told and how to process grief is there are 6 main things that we can hear. And one of the first ones is just give it time. Oh, it's still painful. Just give it time. And the truth is that time itself doesn't heal your grief. It's what you do with your time that will help you complete that pain caused by the loss. All right. Because think about anybody listening in who knows someone that still experiences pain, loneliness from a death of a loved one that was 20 years or longer. Of course, we can think of somebody. So it can't be true that time will make it go away. Just give it time. So it's definitely one of the things that we have learned. Also, stay busy, right? How many folks can think of a spouse passed away and then the remaining spouse basically joins all these clubs and does all these things? Oh, you need to join the widow's club, or you need to join this dinner, or go to the... And it's because they want you just to stay busy. Because if you distract yourself, then you won't be able to have to feel your feelings. All right. So that's definitely one of the things that I practiced after I got divorced was staying busy. I joined a gym. I went every day. I exercised and ran. I worked 60, 80 hours a week. I stayed as busy as humanly possible to distract myself. Another thing that we hear, which is don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. The suffering is over. They're in a better place. And that's confusing, right? Think of it as a little kid saying, no, don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. But I do feel bad, right? Just saying don't feel bad doesn't change the feeling, right? It just says don't talk to me about it. Also, another thing that we've heard is don't worry about that. We'll get you another one, right? Just replace it with something else, right? So think of as a kid, if you lost a pet, right? Oh, we'll just get you another one. Or in some very unfortunate cases, I've heard opposing counsels tell someone who's lost a child or a spouse, oh, you can just go, you can have another one, or you have other kids, you can go find another spouse, just replace it. And again, that's ignoring that uniqueness, the individuality of that relationship that somebody has had with that person. And also, this kind of fuels a lot of the materialistic, just replace it, go get something else in that spot, everything will be fine. A hard thing to do because we can go get a new pet or go get a new spouse, and that's not going to help us process the grief that we're experiencing from that other relationship. Another thing that we hear as little ones, which is grieve alone. Hey, if you're going to cry about that, you better go to your room, or I'm going to give you something to cry about. And it's, hey, we don't want to see that. Go somewhere else. Nobody wants to see your feelings. So they do. And grieve alone also comes in to a place where when people do get emotional, our natural reaction is to hand someone a tissue, to reach out and actually touch them. And when we do that, it interrupts that flow of emotion and it tells that person, clean it up. Stop that. Here's this tissue. Please, you're making me uncomfortable, right? How many times have we seen movies or TV shows where the main character has a loss or a relationship loss or whatever it may be, and then part of the movie montage is them all by themselves somewhere, crying with boxes of tissues or eating or stuffing their face with some kind of ice cream or chocolate or whatever. And it's, oh, that's what we're supposed to do. If you have feelings or if you're sad, you got to go figure it out by yourself all alone. Don't express those feelings around here. And another one that we hear too, which is be strong for others. That somebody else's grief is more important than yours. You need to suck it up. You need to be strong for that person. Be strong for others, right? Be strong for the kids. And again, that's take those feelings and stuff them down. We don't want to hear about them. And that's really what a lot of these 6 things that we hear are about. As little kids, we learn, okay, whoa, we're not going to talk about that. We're not going to deal with that. Nobody wants to see that. Go handle that by yourself or go get another one. And that's where it can be really tricky. So then what happens? We learn very early on, stuff it down. Let's not talk about it. We're not really told how to process, right, this pain, this loneliness, these conflicting feelings. So if we don't process it, it just stays with us. And one of the examples given to us in the class, which I thought was what a great visual, which is basically think of it as we're all walking around with an invisible backpack on. And in this backpack, we carry our feelings, right? We carry because we don't process them, so they stay with us. So some people have a backpack that's very full, right? It's full of all kinds of stuff. They're just carrying it with them, and it can get really heavy. Some people have less. And the process of the grief recovery method is to help look at and deal with in a very healthy way to process everything, to move through it, right? Experience it, move through it. And so when we don't process it, we walk around with our backpack. The other ideas, at some point, we're going to become so full of these unprocessed emotions that we're going to have a lot of pressure, right? So think of it as a teapot, right? That pressure builds up and eventually there's going to be a spout that comes out. And what can happen is we can develop behaviors or actions that help relieve just even the smallest amount of emotional pressure. And it helps for a little bit, but we got to keep doing it again, right? So they're called short-term energy relieving behaviors. Little things that we can do that just blow off a little bit of steam and help us. And we see this again, this is reinforced in a lot of movies and TV shows, what happens when the main character or any character has a breakup or a divorce or a loss. There's going to be some kind of spin behavior going on, whether they're stuffing their face with food or they're going to the bar and they're getting drunk, or they're shopping, or they're stuck on the internet, social media. But all of these are little, and they're true. There are all kinds of examples that can happen when people don't end up dealing with that particular emotion. And specifically when we talk about grief, because it can be so painful and we just don't have a way to process it, therefore it becomes more of a pressing need. And so again, talking about using food, using alcohol, using drugs, shopping, internet, exercise, sleep, tattoos, social media, gambling, church, right? It's really any kind of behavior that we're using to relieve some energy, right? Some of that pressure so that we can go back, right, to living our normal lives, what we call our normal lives, with our backpack on our back, right, full of grief. So it can be really scary when we have folks that come to us, they're experiencing a loss. Again, we've talked about different types of cases that can produce losses: business cases, family law cases, criminal cases, personal injury cases. Pretty much any kind of place where there is a lawsuit and a conflict and a dispute, there's going to be some loss of trust there between the people who are feuding. But definitely there could be a loss of a job, loss of health. There could be tangible losses of money along the way as well. And what ends up happening is, because this is adding a lawsuit on top of it, adds more stress, you're going to see that our clients are going through these short-term energy relieving behaviors. And sometimes they last and sometimes they don't, because it doesn't keep relieving the pressure like it used to. So you may see people get on the exercise bandwagon and they're great for 6 months and all of a sudden they fall off, and then they're back to overeating, and it can bounce around. But basically there's just a lot of pressure there, and that's where we as folks who are studying from the outside can say, hey, what have you been hearing? Some of these things that people say, hey, it's going to take time, stay busy, versus talking about it or finding a way to process it. And there may be, again, some of these short-term energy relieving behaviors that your clients are engaging in. And again, here's the thing is, we have this thought that grief will manifest itself immediately after the loss or the change, and it gets better with time. You may find somebody who's a year after the loss, and you think, oh, this stuff's not going to apply. And that's not true, because they haven't processed it yet. You're going to be seeing some of these things, maybe a little more subtle, but here's the rub with what we do and these lawsuits is we just bring it all back up, right? Most of our clients, they want to stuff it down, right? They're either like super aggressive, let's get this done immediately, or they're just don't contact me and they want to stuff it down and not think about it. And we get back on the phone, we got to get ready for deposition, we're going to trial, we need discovery, and you're just bringing it all back up, right? All those feelings back up. And so it makes them, they'll try ways they've done in the past to help relieve some of that emotional pressure. But most of the time you're going to see it as a lawyer resurface, because we are resurfacing. We're going back through those painful memories, going back through that relationship or that change that caused the grief in the first place. So we've talked about what is grief, and now we've talked about ways we've been told incorrectly to deal with grief, to not process it, and then ways that we try to process it, right? Through our short-term energy relieving behaviors, through things that we may see people trying to stay busy, people just telling themselves it's just going to take a little bit of time, right? Or maybe they go out and try to replace that loss with another spouse, with another pet, with another activity, another job along the way. So I hope that this helps in identify and having more information for awareness as to how we've been taught to process, or rather to intellectually look at grief, right? Not emotionally process it, in ways that may be manifesting when we don't deal with it. So I hope that this podcast was helpful, and join me in our next week for the follow-up for episode 3 in our grief series about how grief can show up for our clients, how can we navigate that, and how can we be more helpful in communication with our clients. And until next time, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. And following the podcast also allows those downloads to automatically come to your device so you can listen to it when we come out on Wednesday. All right, thank you.